Hello YouTube, how are you? I'm fine, thanks for asking. New bonus, new thumbnail design with the double stripes, nothing too fancy. And new game, I have some Sniper Elite 3 in the background for you. It's a pretty good game, it's a nice stealth game with some nice sniping mechanics. I mean, of course, the X-ray slow motion sniper shots are pretty spectacular. And yes, in case you're wondering, I probably will do the weapons of Sniper Elite 3, although there's not that many weapons. There's 4 rifles, 3 submachine guns, a rocket launcher, and 3 pistols. So it might not be the longest video in the world, but there will be a lot of slow motion kills, and possibly a few testicle shots, but we'll see. Anyway, let's get on to the questions. I think I might keep it rapid fire like last week, just because, it lets me answer a lot of different questions and, well, sometimes I can go on a single subject for too long. So, first up, Mad Max says, Stu, what do you think of Airsoft? How do you feel about people owning replica weapons, and have you ever been, / will you go, to an Airsoft skirmish? Here in the UK, replica weapons are quite tightly controlled. The irony is, you can actually buy a real weapon that's been deactivated with no sort of background checks, but to get, like, a fake weapon, a replica weapon, you either have to be in film or television, or be an Airsoft skirmisher, or there has to be a decent reason for it, basically. Now, I think, if you're a collector or if you're an airsofter, then obviously owning replica weapons is fine, but, I mean, you've got to be responsible with them, you can't go waving them around outside. So, what do I think about Airsoft? Well, it's good, clean fun, isn't it? I've never really felt the compulsion to get seriously into it, though. I mean, none of my friends are into it, I'm not sure if there are any skirmishes particularly near me, and video games kind of fill the same desire to run around and shoot people that airsofting does, and airsofting is, well, it's a bit more expensive. I've been paintballing a couple of times, and that's alright, it's a bit of fun. Getting shot is less fun, but I suppose that's just the way things go. Richie Hartley says, So Stu, what do you think of the new directed energy weapons in COD Advanced Warfare? They seem like the new LMGs. Do you think the concept of battery cooldown will balance them out? Do you know, I have no idea. I haven't been following the hype for Advanced Warfare. I saw the E3 trailer, and I think there's been a trailer since then, but I haven't seen it. You'd think, someone in my business probably should stay on top of this sort of stuff, but, like I say, I just haven't bought into the hype this year at all. I'm sure the directed energy weapons, I'm sure they'll fit into the balance somehow. Sledgehammer must have a faint clue of what to do. Call of Duty is fairly well rehearsed by now. But I think I can wait until November before getting too invested in the game. I've got other series to worry about before then. Paul Seiler says, Hey Stu, have you heard the news about the HK G36 potentially being replaced in the Bundeswehr? Which weapon do you think might replace it? And what do you think about the G36 in general? Personally, I favour the G3, such a classic Cold War battle rifle, beneath the almighty FAL, of course. I actually quite like the G36. I think it might be my favourite conventional layout service rifle. Honestly, I can't think of anything that could replace it. I understand the optics unit on it isn't the best. Sometimes the red dot sight on it gets a little bit foggy. So maybe I can imagine a replacement being festooned with Picatinny rails instead to be a little bit more configurable. I think for standard infantry roles as well, bullpup is probably going to be pretty much the de facto standard, because it does make for a shorter, more flexible weapon overall, even at the expense of having a better trigger. So maybe something like the Orge 3 could replace it. But of course, nationalism kind of comes to the fore with rifle design, so the replacement for the G36 will almost certainly be a German design. Of course, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of faith in your own arms industry. Heaven knows the British Army's persevered with the L85 design long enough. So I have no idea what would replace the G36. It's probably going to be German, possibly a bullpup, so probably some kind of new design. And in typical German style, it'll be given a very utilitarian name. It'll be the G something, won't it? Legit Scope says, In your opinion, what makes an FPS game a good FPS? What would you do if you were developing a game? If I was going to sum it up in one word, it would be kinesthetics. Basically the feel of the game. Stuff like the controls and the way the recoil's handled, the way the gun moves, the screen shakes, the flash. Pair this with responsive controls and you've generally got yourself a formula for a winner. Everything on top of that is just gravy. Rosmic, or Rosmich, says, Stuart, do you like Special Brew? I say it is the best lager of all time. What about cider? A good scrumpy is cheap and tasty. Do you know what? I don't think I've ever tried Special Brew. For those who don't know, it's a very strong lager. I think it weighs in at about 9% ABV. It is essentially the tramp's drink of choice, or the hobo's drink of choice for my American chums. You can get 4 cans of it pretty cheap, and 1 can is about the equivalent of 2 or 3 regular cans. So you don't have to go to the bathroom as often, which means you can panhandle for longer. I guess it's like a British analogue to malt liquor. And taste-wise, I imagine it's not spectacular, but, you know, who cares about the taste, right? As far as cider's concerned, I'm not a big fan of the commercial stuff, like Strongbow and stuff like that. It's a bit fizzy and a bit, I don't know, it's a little bit unpleasant. I quite like Perry's, pear ciders, they're quite nice. But a decent, like a proper cider, like, you know, not like a commercially brewed, pasteurised one. Like a proper cloudy, I think that's alright, that's nice, yeah. It's refreshing, well, it gets you there as well. Daredevil Zombie says, 1. What is your least favourite firearm in real life? 2. What's your favourite shotgun? And 3. What kind of era do you prefer in video games? Modern, World War II, futuristic settings, etc. Least favourite weapon? This is actually a surprisingly tough question, because I don't know, I find it hard to hate a mechanical device. So there's not that many weapons that inspire revulsion or anything like that. I mean, some of the worst weapons are the most interesting. But in a practical sense, let's say I was fighting in World War II and somebody handed me the French Chauchat. Maybe I'd be sweating a little bit then. The Chauchat is arguably one of the worst military weapons of all time. It was a French light machine gun used in the First World War, and it just wasn't very good. It was finicky, and worst of all, it had an open magazine, which basically attracted all kinds of dirt and detritus, which didn't really help on the stoppage front. To be fair, early on, in 1908, it was a pretty good gun. I mean, there weren't that many lightweight automatic weapons that could do what the Chauchat could. Unfortunately, it was used until the end of the Second World War, and by then there were many weapons that could do better. So that's my answer to the first one, I'll stick with that. Second, what's your favourite shotgun? Stylistically speaking, probably the Spaz 12. It's got a distinctive appearance, it was in Jurassic Park, and in part, the Aliens films. And it's a cool gun, you know, it's dual mode, pump action / semi-auto, which is kind of cool. It's not very practical, but it's kind of cool. Practically though, I'd probably favour the Benelli M4. It's a modern, reliable, semi-automatic shotgun, and yeah, it looks nice. It's a mean-looking weapon. As far as my favourite era in video games, I want to say the 80s. I think the 80s are a pretty cool setting. Of course, back in the 80s, we just used to call it modern, but apparently that's shifted now. But the hedonistic era of neon lights and hard drugs and pinball tables, I can get behind that. I'd really love to see a Call of Duty based in kind of like a Vice City setting, the 80s, you know? Stupid fashion, stupid haircuts, and wonderful colours as well. Duncan Clark says, being educated on the benefits of PC, why do you trap yourself by playing on an X-Bone most of the time? PC Ahoy has a nice ring to it. Well, let's be honest, I'm far from trapped. I have pretty much every single option at my disposal, bar a few of the handhelds. I've got a Wii U, I've got a PS4, I've got an Xbox One, I've got a reasonably good PC as well. And truth be told, I play on them all. And my primary platforms are probably the PC and the Xbox One. That's where I go to first. Some games I like on PC, others I prefer on the console. Generally speaking, I prefer the game on its primary platform. Like some games, let's be honest, are designed as console games. That's where their primary market is. Like Watch Dogs, I played that on the Xbox One. Now, it could have been better on the PC in some respects. It would have run at a higher resolution, it probably would have had, you know, better quality graphics all round. But I don't know. From what I heard, the port wasn't brilliant. So while performance on the Xbox One is, you know, it's underwhelming, it's about the same as a mid-range PC, it does at least kind of cut you free from the worry that, you know, maybe this game could be running better on my system. There's no worries like that, you know, there's no sort of optimization or driver concerns at all. I mean, I'll be honest, it's not really that much fun playing a bad port of a console game, and it sounds like that's what Watch Dogs was. So playing on the console lets me sidestep that issue, and more to the point, I really like the unified social stuff on consoles. This is not something that PC does particularly well because of the PC's primary strength. PC is a flexible, adaptable system. You can run anything you like on a PC, but this strength means you don't have the benefits of a unified social system. Every game on the Xbox One goes through Xbox Live, which means you can see your friends' scoreboards and all that sort of stuff. And you can do that on the PC as well, but there isn't such a standard as far as the social systems are in place. I mean, you've got Steam, you've got Origin, and Blizzard have got Blizzard.net, but everything's kind of disparate. So you need to add your friends multiple times to see them, and it can mean sometimes everything becomes a little bit fractured. And unless you've got a huge social group, you might not have a huge number of friends on any given game. So I know it's unfashionable to defend consoles, and I'm not really defending them. If you want to play on PC, more power to you. Good for you, son. But I do think it is fair to say that the social integration is much better on consoles than it is on PC. I know Steam is pretty widespread, but not every game is on Steam. And if you think Steam is PC gaming, well then you might as well be on a console, because you're limiting yourself just as much. Anyway, as far as my channel and, the name of it, it's probably not going to change. I'm going to leave it as it is for brand recognition. As far as the games that I play and the games that I cover, though, you can expect a pretty broad range of platforms that I'll be playing on. Raoul7X says, any comments on the YouTubers should pay royalties to developers? Today, Phil Fish brought up. On another note, have you played Spec Ops The Line? If so, any thoughts on the story? Phil Fish. I like Phil Fish. All right, he's a bit of a contentious fellow, and I can see why a lot of people don't like him. But me, I can respect him for his contentiousness. And I think he does bring up a pretty good point. I think game developers, game publishers do own the rights to the footage that people like me rely on. They do at least have a stake in those rights, even if it's not absolute. So I think a game developer or publisher could say, I don't want any YouTube videos made of this game. I think they are within their rights to say that. I think as long as they're transparent about it, as long as their terms are clear, then I don't really have a problem. If somebody says you can't make any videos on this, Stu, then fine, I won't make any videos for it. I'll do something else. I mean, there is a value in the videos that YouTubers produce, believe it or not. I know some publishers recognise this, and this is, it's good for everybody, really. But at the same time, Phil Fish does raise an interesting point. I think what's really needed is a more robust kind of set of rules for what is allowable and what isn't allowable. Under fair use, you can get away with using some copyrighted footage for the purpose of criticism. The trouble is that YouTube's automated systems aren't really good at telling what's criticism and what's not. So, I don't know, it's kind of messy from a legal perspective. There does need to be some clarification on that front. But again, as far as entertainment videos are concerned, I do think publishers have a right to exert their copyright. They would be foolish to exert it, but they do retain that right. We can't pretend as YouTubers that we own every aspect of the footage we produce. It is derivative work, technically. BitBit says, on the Weapons of Enemy Front video, you didn't give the Molotov cocktail a country. Why was that? I think it was first documented in use in the Spanish Civil War, even though the name came from Finland in the Winter War. Oh yeah, sorry Finland. I think I upset some Finns by not attributing the Molotov cocktail to them. It's an improvised weapon though, and it doesn't really have a designer, it doesn't really have an origin. There have been people using incendiary devices with flammable liquids for quite some time. I mean, it goes all the way back to stuff like Greek fire. So while I'm aware that the term Molotov cocktail comes from the Finns, I don't think in any sort of good faith I could attribute the entire history of such an improvised weapon to them. But I do recognise Finland's ability to set things on fire, I really do. Funky Fuji 135 says, people view the Half-Life series in some godly state of brilliance, although I seem to have missed this. What's your opinion on these games? I love Half-Life. It definitely ranks, the entire series definitely ranks amongst my favourite games of all time. The period from 1998, when the first Half-Life game came out, to 2007, which is when Half-Life 2 Episode 2 came out. That period, 98 to 2007, that marks my tenure as a pretty fervent PC fanboy. The PC was the only platform I had between those years. Before 1998, I was all about the Amiga. The Amiga was my first love, and I still have a love for it today. But the last refresh of the Amiga hardware was in 1992. So by 1998, it was time to move on. And of course, the PC was the logical choice. It was games like Grand Theft Auto and Carmageddon that sealed the deal for me. But Half-Life was one that came out whilst I still had my PC, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Half-Life 2 I actually got through a promotion with ATI. ATI gave a free copy of Half-Life 2 away if you bought a 9800 XT, which was, for its time, the most powerful consumer graphics card that money could buy in 2003. This came at the same time that I had my first job, so I had a little bit of disposable income. So I spent, I think it was £350 on a graphics card, and by heck it was glorious. Of course, Half-Life 2 was incredibly delayed, because Valve delay things, that's what they do, and it came out eventually late 2004. That's when I first signed up for Steam, and that's when I first played Half-Life 2. And it managed to live up to expectations. It managed to be a worthy successor to Half-Life the First. And then time goes on, the episodic ones come out and they tell us, oh, it's the future of PC gaming, episodic content, there's going to be a new Half-Life every year. Brilliant! I love Half-Life, I'd love a new one every year. And then they don't come out every year. In fact, there's one, and then there's another a couple of years later, and then there's nothing. There's nothing but silence. So anyway, Half-Life underpins my experience with the PC. It is, like I say, one of my favourite games. But I've noticed in recent years, it has kind of become fashionable to disparage Half-Life, to say, oh, it's not as good as you remember. And I feel as though this is unfair. The fact of the matter is that games, as they get older, they become harder to play. They become less technically impressive, and we get used to some conveniences of the modern age. Believe it or not, video games are getting better. Developers are learning what people like in games, what they don't like in games. And we kind of get used to a certain level of technical accomplishment as far as graphics are concerned. Like, people complain about 30 frames a second today. Well, back in 1991, if you got 30 frames a second in a three-dimensional game, you must have been running on some sort of supercomputer, because we had flat-shaded polygons running at about 5 frames a second. That's kind of the thing about technology, though. Even the stuff that's impressive today, well, in 10, 20 years from now, will look archaic, it'll look old, it'll look out of date. So it can be difficult to look at a game that's nearly 20 years old now and see it through the same eyes of the age. Half-Life, although it might be a little bit less accessible today than it was, it is nonetheless a watershed moment for gaming. I think it should be celebrated, and I will fight anybody who tells me it's not a good game. There's a page on TV tropes about this sort of thing called Seinfeld's Not Funny. The idea being was that Seinfeld was kind of the original sitcom in so many respects, that it pushed the envelopes in ways that have become normal and ordinary today. So when people hear about how Seinfeld's supposed to be good, and they watch it for the first time today, they're underwhelmed. They think, hang on a minute, this is supposed to be a really good sitcom series, and, well, compared to some of the stuff we've got today, it just isn't that good. Anyway, good job sticking to the quickfire questions, Stu. Yeah, 5 minutes on Half-Life, that'll win them over. Go for the Nut says, hi Stu, how much life do you think the last gen Xbox 360 and PS3 has left? Personally, I simply can't afford to buy an next gen console, so I'm stuck with my 360. When do you think game developers are going to hit the final nail in the coffin and stop making games for them? Well, there is a large install base for Gen 7, so it depends on what you play, I think is the answer. If you play FIFA, then you're probably pretty safe for the next decade. I mean, they released FIFA 14 for the PS2, for goodness sake, so there will be some new games for the Xbox 360 and PS3 for quite some time, at least. The Kyle Master says, Stu, how do you feel about the England team coming home early from the World Cup? Personally, I don't mind so much. I mean, I'll be honest, I get the most enjoyment out of World Cup matches when it's a team that I don't have any particular affiliation with. I just like watching, all of the world's teams come out to play, and I think it's brilliant. I've been quite enjoying Belgium's performance. They've been doing pretty well. My condolences to the USA, of course. They fought hard, they fought long, but Belgium, really strong team this year. Which is nice to see. Belgium, small country, but they are geographically positioned quite well. They're in between France, Germany, and the Netherlands, so you'd think they would be the perfect blend of football. And here we are. So yeah, I mean, England going home early doesn't bother me that much. It means I can enjoy the football for what it really is, instead of pinning my hopes on a rather lackluster team. XNoobX says, YouTube now supports 60 frames a second. Will you take advantage of this and make videos at 60 frames a second in the future? Yes, where workflow permits at least. I capture all of my HDMI footage at 60 frames a second, so anything that I record on a console, ironically enough, will be captured at 60 frames a second. Unfortunately, not all console games run at 60 frames a second, but for those that do, I will probably edit and upload at 60 frames a second. So the Advanced Warfare series I do, I think that might be a good series to make 60 frames a second. Now, for the other stuff, like the multi-game videos, I don't know about that. The trouble with multi-game videos is some footage I actually record at 30 frames a second native. So it remains to be seen how that'll look, because it might be a jumble of 30 frames and 60 frames in a single video. So I don't know if it's better to just crunch everything down to 30 frames a second or not. Certainly makes it easier to edit and upload. I mean, you're dealing with half the size of footage, so I don't know, we'll see. We'll take it as it comes. But I do think it's feasible that some stuff that I do in the future will be at 60 frames a second. Alright, time for one more question, I think. Tyson Matsuki says, "Hey Stu, you missed my question. No matter, I'll answer again. What would you do with a $4 million a year salary?" Well, I'll assume this comes without any sort of strings attached. I'm guessing this is just a salary just for existing. I don't have to do any work or anything. The first thing I'd do is I'd probably employ somebody to look after my money. When you start talking millions, the money starts to come with its own baggage, and you'll probably save more than you'd spend with a good accountant. Beyond that, first major purchase would probably be property. I'd probably upsize a little bit, because I'm stuck in a pokey 3-bed house at the minute. It's my house, I'm very proud of it, but at the end of the day, it's just a 3-bed semi. I wouldn't go crazy, but you know, it would be quite nice to have some decent studio space. I'm stuck in the second bedroom at the minute, which, you know, I'm grateful for. I have my own space to work and record in, but again, it's pokey. After that, you know, I'd probably do the same thing. I'd probably still make videos. I kind of like it. This is kind of what I like doing. Maybe I could fund more fanciful projects, and certainly, you know, with greater studio space, I could probably do more. Maybe I'd employ a couple of people to assist me on stuff. Maybe I'll be able to increase my output. Get some writing assistance. Get a lackey to record gameplay footage for me. Make Ahoy Studios a reality. Anyway, it's all fanciful really, isn't it? If I want more money, I guess I'm going to have to earn it the old-fashioned way. I guess I'll just keep on making videos and see where that leads. Speaking of videos, what have we got on the horizon? Next major series, Iconic Arms. 6 episodes, coming fairly soon. Just before that, I'm going to do another episode of Brief History of Piracy, of the nautical ilk, of course. And there may be a couple of additional videos. I'm probably going to do a Weapons of Sniper Elite 3, and I might finish off the Weapons of Metro Last Light as well. So if I were to plot out a roadmap, we're probably looking at next week Sniper Elite, week after that Last Light, week after that Pirates, week after that maybe the first Iconic Arms, or maybe a week off, I'm not 100% sure yet, and then 6 weeks of Iconic Arms. What's after that? Nobody knows. Maybe another episode of Brief History, maybe some more Weapons of. Maybe I'll kickstart Retro Ahoy again. Actually, that could be a good gap filler between the end of Iconic Arms and the beginning of, you know, Call of Duty season. Anyway, we'll take it as it comes, and until then, farewell.